Hello, my name is Thomas Zaruba. Welcome to my OAT Talk. Today we'll be talking about air traffic control and technology helping humans. We have a lot to talk about, so we're going to dive right in. Modern air traffic control is an extremely complex system that extends far beyond the control tower at your local airport. Air traffic controllers must read and interpret information from 26 different traffic management systems. Think of these transitions in air traffic control systems as a typical transition from a legacy system to an enterprise system. All commercial flights utilize instrument flight rules, or IFR, throughout the entirety of the flight. IFR involves the use of multiple different independent information systems. Just as a side note, we're going to focus mostly on American standards for air traffic control today. We might touch on European a little bit, but for the most part, just American standards. For an overview of how air traffic control kind of works, it's a grid system. What you see here is the major grids for the United States. Within the grid that you see here are smaller grid squares, and each controller at a control center is responsible for his or her own grid. So as a plane moves from one grid square to another, the plane is handed off from one controller to another. So as you can imagine, we have many air traffic controllers controlling not such a large amount of space. The current air traffic control system encompasses all FAA personnel and equipment used to manage and coordinate the safe and efficient movement of all aircraft in controlled airspace, on runways and taxiways, and in maintenance areas. Some of the systems currently in use for air traffic control include VHF, or Very High Frequency Radio, SMR and ASDE, which are Surface Movement Radar and Airport Surface Detection Equipment, and those kind of work hand in hand with each other. RDPDS, or Radar Data Processing and Display System. This is the onboard radar in the aircraft and is also utilized in the control tower and control centers as well. We have FDPS, or Flight Data Processing System, better known to most of us as autopilot. And we have ILS, the Instrument Landing System. Finally, there's Monopulse Secondary Surveillance Radar, or MSSR. As you can see, there are a large array of systems being used in flight and on the ground, and many of these systems do not communicate with each other. They all operate independently of one another. An example being ILS and autopilot. They work completely separate. Autopilot does not land the plane, and ILS is used to guide the plane down but doesn't in and of itself land the plane. Another thing to note is radar. Radar has about a 200-mile range. Radar cannot effectively reach over large bodies of water, which is why we have so many systems used for tracking planes. Automation of air traffic control practices was first conceptualized in the late 1990s. In 1998, an FAA panel recommended higher levels of automation for decision and selection systems. The panel also recommended that automation efforts focus on reliable, high-level automation applications for information acquisition, integration, and presentation for aiding controller decision-making in order to support all system functions. However, systems associated with greater risk should not be brought to higher levels of automation, the panel decided, mostly because automation does open the door for further uncertainty in human air traffic control decision-making. The FAA employs a zero-accident policy, or zero-accident philosophy. The current rate of accidents does remain low, with even fewer accidents being caused by air traffic control or air traffic control systems. However, zero accident does not mean zero incident. A lack of air traffic control systems in some places has caused incidences of confusion. An example of that would be in January of this year, a Southwest Airlines flight bound for Branson, Missouri landed at the wrong airport. This was caused by a lack of ILS and pilot unfamiliarity with the airport or airports. Had ILS been implemented at Branson, this situation could easily have been avoided. A similar situation occurred in 2013 with a Boeing supply plane bound for Wichita, which instead of landing at its own factory airport, landed at a smaller regional airport outside Wichita. And I find that quite comical considering Boeing designs many of these systems that are being placed into planes, such as the ILS system or the ACARS system. The time the FAA forgot about drones. In 2003, Congress ordered the FAA to design a next-generation air traffic control system, simply titled NextGen. The system was supposed to be designed to handle future increases in air traffic. Congress gave explicit instructions to include drone technology in the NextGen system, but despite these instructions, the FAA failed to incorporate drone technology. 11 years and $5 billion later, the FAA is scrambling to catch up and incorporate some sort of system to handle drones, because drones operate on different systems for the most part than commercial traffic. This is yet another system that air traffic controllers are going to have to interact with, as whatever system is eventually implemented for drone traffic probably won't communicate well with the next gen system. And of course, we can't go back and start over and spend another $5 billion in another 11 years designing another next-gen system on top of the next-gen system we've already developed. The free flight concept. Currently, commercial air traffic follows common flight paths. Think of these flight paths as highways in the sky. Flight plans must follow these flight paths, which are often inefficient because they are not the most direct route from point A to point B, nor do they utilize the curvature of the Earth. Flight paths are pre-programmed into the FDPS system before takeoff, and the pilot has very little control over the flight plan in and of itself. I mean, obviously they make adjustments in the air, but the flight paths are pretty much set and standardized. The free flight concept or free routing concept is a conceptual air traffic control system currently being tested in Spain by a company known as Indra. What free flight or free routing is that it allows pilots to select their own flight paths. This could actually cut time, at least it's been estimated in testing, by 10 minutes, or up to 10 minutes per flight. In free flight, flight paths are not programmed into the autopilot system until 25 minutes before departure. In the system, traffic controllers would only need to make adjustments to the flight path for mostly weather. This combines IFR, or instrument flight rules, with VFR, which are visual flight rules, again giving more control to the pilot and taking control away from the controllers on the ground. The Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast System, ADS-B. This is the first real-world step towards the free routing concept. What ADS-B is doing is utilizing satellite navigation and providing that crucial data link between the aircraft and controllers. This is more accurate than radar and radio navigation, and when I say radio navigation, I'm speaking towards transponders that are currently in the plane that are used to track the plane's position. This could actually be implemented quite easily with the current ACARS system that's in place. ACARS, which is the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, is actually used to monitor how the plane is operating, but it communicates with satellites and relays that information back to airplane manufacturers and the owners of the airplanes themselves, whether they be leasing companies or carriers such as Delta and United. ADB-S could be incorporated with ACARS, thus saving time and money. The data gathered from ADB-S, when combined with flight trajectory data, can pinpoint an aircraft at any given place and any given time. It's not susceptible to the constraints of radar or very high-frequency radio. Free flight could be disastrous from a regulatory standpoint. If you think about all these different pilots selecting their own flight paths and not following a common flight path structure, you could have a bunch of planes in one small area, and that could lead to collisions. Flights would still need to be monitored from the ground, perhaps more so than they are now in a free flight system, even though air traffic control intervention is supposed to be reduced. The current system, however, will struggle to cope with consistently increasing air traffic, just like any regular highway on the ground would. New air traffic control systems being implemented. We have Tower Flight Data Manager, Traffic Load Prediction Device or Traffic Load Prediction System, and IFACS. Tower Flight Data Manager. This is being developed by MIT's Lincoln Laboratory and is currently in testing. For short, it's known as TFDM. It's expected to be deployed here in just a couple years in 2017. TFDM will work in conjunction with On-Route Automation Modernization, or ERAM, and Terminal Automation Modernization and Replacement, or TAMR. These systems are used at the airport level of air traffic control. TFDM is the big data approach to air traffic control and will use the data it gathers to aid in decision-making at the airport level. So this is used to control traffic, between the runway and the gate and maintenance areas, so on and so forth, things like that. Simply put, TFDM is a decision engine that integrates a system being used at the terminal and a system being used as planes are approaching the airport, which is the ERAM. TFDM will allow for flights and air traffic control to be more efficient on the ground. According to the Lincoln Lab, airports themselves are the biggest setback to modernizing air traffic control, mostly because many airports can't afford to implement all these systems at one time. The FAA mandates that airports need to update their systems, but the airports themselves have to pay for it and can't always afford it. Traffic Load Prediction Device, or Traffic Load Prediction System, TLPS. This one's already helping air traffic control systems. This has helped reduce delays attributable to air traffic control from 21.9 seconds per flight in 2008 to 4.6 seconds per flight in 2009. What this is doing is helping air traffic control, essentially what it says, predict the traffic load for the day. By predicting how much traffic is coming in or out of the airport, air traffic controllers will have a better idea and a better understanding of how they can move traffic around and keep it efficient and moving, at a good pace. And although marginal, these seconds do add up quickly when you think about it. 4.6 seconds per flight. I mean, when you add that up, that's, I think, 100 flights a day. We're talking 40 minutes per day times 365 days a year. That's a huge reduction in delays. Finally, we have IFACS. IFACS is being developed by a British company known as NATS. This utilizes tools based on trajectory prediction and conflict detection. IFACS allows controllers to look up to 18 minutes into the future to test the viability of various options for maneuver in aircraft. What this is doing, this is kind of bridging the gap in air traffic control systems upgrades and is easily integrated into current systems. Where it's been implemented so far, IFACS has delivered a 15% increase in airspace by being able to predict where a plane's going to be and when it's going to be there. And it's also helped reduce delays by 1.4 seconds because we don't have to divert as many flights or put them in a traffic pattern before landing. However, IFACS does keep flight control more in the hands of the controllers and less in the hands of the pilots, which is in stark contrast to the free flight concept that we discussed earlier. In conclusion, you can see that there is still much work to be done in the air traffic control system. Air traffic control will probably never be as cut and dried in reality as it can be on paper. It's one of those things easier said than done. We must always bear in mind that the aspects of humans in relation to I'm going to try that one again. We must always bear in mind the aspect of humans in respect to technology. Air traffic control changes can be difficult due to the perception of the general public. For instance, Airbus is currently working on a windowless cockpit where pilots would fly via video screens. And I don't know about you, but I personally wouldn't want to get onto a plane where the cockpit had no windows. I think that would be kind of scary. So I thank you for listening. I hope you learned something today. Have a good one.